Good evening, Lisa. Good evening to all of you, young people of Jamaica. I must say I had no idea how many people to expect when I came here, and I can see it's a massive that is here. I heard the Minister of Youth and Culture, who I want to thank for the invitation and for organizing the function, say that we only needed to sit and take the questions, and then she said I should say something. So I really am going to leave more time for questions, but I wanted to share a little bit about our perspectives on the problems that we face as a country, and our perspectives on how those changes and developments are likely to affect you, who, after all, really are the future of the country and the future of the world. Now, as I was coming, I thought about ways in which today's world differs from the world 20, 30 years ago, and what that means for the individual person. In many ways, I think the world today, the world that you confront, whether you have just left high school, left university, just started work, is very different in ways much more exciting and in ways much more daunting and forbidding than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. There is much more travel in the world today than there was a few years ago. I remember when I left high school, I applied to one university, University of the West Indies. Never thought of anything else, anywhere else. But there are many young people nowadays who correctly see the world as a place that of unlimited possibilities as far as deciding where to study and what to do after leaving school. I've seen some young people taking, and they have had good experiences, taking SATs and filling in forms for numerous schools. I've been to cities in Asia like Tokyo and Beijing and see young Jamaicans coming out of Hampton or Monroe or Black River High decided that they'd go and teach English in Tokyo for a year. So that's an exciting prospect. Ordinary Jamaican young people facing it. At the same time, the world is a much more competitive place. The prospect of employment and what to do after studying, because it has to finish sometime. Some people continue just as a means of filling time. But what to do? The world economy is much more competitive. Globalization has meant that everyone, anywhere, is competing for the same job everywhere. Economic crisis, especially in the last, since 2008, and in Jamaica, issues that we're going to talk about, have meant that the reality here has made many people worried about whether they'll get a job, whether they'll be able to move out of their parents' house, whether they'll be able to find a spouse and take care of him and her, or her. And so these are challenges. I was thinking back myself. I remember, you know, I left UWI at the 1970, my undergraduate degree, and it was a time of great rebellion, and you know, I turned down jobs because for crazy reasons. In one case, with one company, the MD, whose name I won't call, said I had to shave to get the job. I said I wouldn't do it. So, but what struck me, I never felt then that if I wanted one, it was going to be a problem. But then that was a Jamaica that had been growing for the previous 20 years at 5% and more per annum. Jamaica, between 1950 and 1970, was the fastest growing economy in the world, driven by bauxite investments, the emergence of a new tourism industry, manufacturing, etc. For the next 40 years after that, which is the heart of the problem, for the next 40 years, we have been among the slowest growing economies in the world. We've grown on average between 1970 and today at less than 1% per annum average. And over the same period, our debt has grown by 600%, till the point where it couldn't grow anymore because nobody was prepared to lend you anymore. But so there are two sets of things that have contributed to the deep uncertainty which I think most young people are feeling. One is the general transformation of the world that we associate with the term globalization, meaning that there has been just more and more interaction, flows of goods, commodities, people, information. You know, if something happens in Bosnia, you can see every day what is happening on some Greek island, Lesbos, as Syrians pour across the border and everybody in the world is watching the same thing. That's one aspect of globalization. But the other aspect is, in effect, that production is increasingly globalized. Call centers here are responding to developments happening in California, Minneapolis, Manila, as the case may be. In fact, we had a very protected economy at one point, and in fact, we went through lots of changes in the 90s. We liberalized our currencies and, among other things, opened up our economy. We had to do it, and it was highlighted to me one day when one purchaser of a major chain said, you know, I can't do business with Jamaica. And I'm talking about 1990. Can't do business with Jamaica for the simple reason, and probably most of you weren't even born in 1990. I won't ask you to show your hands though, because I would embarrass some people. But they said, when I want to order 35 dozen, 100 dozen shirts, so I call Poland and they give me a quote. I call Asia, Thailand, they give me a quote. And when I call Jamaica, they say, I have to check. The suppliers say, I have to check whether we can get foreign exchange in order to make the batch. They say, we can't wait. That's not how our business works. So a lot of the changes and the impulses for the changes have been driven by just this fact of globalization. But even then, even as we liberalized our currency and did other things, we equally didn't complete the reforms in our own economy, and we continued to grow our debt, such that our debt to GDP, which is the measure, the ratio of debt to your overall production, stood in 2012 at 147% of GDP, which simply means that if we consumed nothing in that year as a country and took all that we produced, we couldn't pay it off. Now, some countries and some people have said, don't pay the debt. And maybe big countries have that option. But in our judgment, it's not an option that we could pursue. Simply put, what it would mean is that the rest of the world would simply stop doing business with us. Big countries that can replace what they import with domestic production may have that option. Argentina chose it in part, just refused to pay, said they couldn't pay. But since, if you look inside here, just look at yourself, the clothes you're wearing, the shoes, the jewelry, the glasses for those who are wearing, all of that is imported. And it's not that you're importing it because your production is bad. You don't have the basic raw materials here to replace. So it means simply that we have to make adjustments to correct the situation with the debt and to create the conditions where debt is not the impediment to growth and to creating the kind of economic structure that can offer the fulfillment of the Jamaican dream or the prospects of jobs that you all have been, that everybody has a legitimate right to expect. So what we have in 2012, effectively, our Jamaica was closed off to international credit. Our debt was the highest, among the highest, certainly in the Caribbean and in the world. It was consuming 80% of our budget. 80% of our budget, 2012, was spent simply servicing debt and paying wages. So every complaint that you have, which are legitimate complaints, about the road won't fix, school don't have this, hospital don't have that, all of those needs, police don't have enough cars, was to be financed from the 20 remaining in the budget. We were spending about 60 cents in the dollar paying debt, 20 cents paying wages, and we were rapidly approaching a situation where what would happen was that we would be spending 100% paying the debt and have nothing to do anything else. In fact, there have been countries, there are countries where they can't even pay the wages. It is in that context that we entered into the agreement with the fund. It has involved tremendous sacrifice for everyone. First thing we did was rescheduled, and it was a precondition for the agreement. Reschedule your domestic debt. And in fact, they said reschedule all your debt, except that a lot of the dollar-denominated debt, US dollar-denominated debt, was held by local financial institutions. So we said we can't pay now. Let's reduce the interest rates on that debt and we'll pay it. Come February, we're going to be paying out $62 billion on that debt. We said we had to have a wage freeze. The trade unions and others signed up to it to draw a line on the amount of the wages that was being consumed. And it said you had to raise more revenues and pay down your debt and not build up new debt. So where we are now is that the debt is down. It was at 147. It's today at 127%, 26% of GDP, approximately. Taken about 20 points off it. We have been in the position to end the wage freeze. Our interest rates are down. Unemployment is down, not far enough. Youth unemployment is down, but still much too high, and much higher than the average unemployment rate. And there is growth which is still not great enough, but it has returned. Now, what's the overall strategy? Overall strategy, first of all, is to, the way I put it, talking to some bankers this morning and some trade unionists later in the day, is that to get Jamaica to function and appear and have the basic economic profile of a normal economy, quote unquote. Normal economies have single-digit inflation and below. Normal economies have interest rates in the single digits. Normal economies are able to generate sufficient jobs to absorb the population coming onto the market each year. Normal economies are in the situation that would facilitate an efficient public sector which facilitates the investor, private investor. Now, what we have been doing, as I said, we've been making progress on all of these counts, but we are still in a very fragile situation. And most of all, what we're seeking to do is to find the way of generating the kind of opportunities for young people that will reduce this uncertainty about life that I spoke of earlier. It will involve many things. First of all, it involves a reform of the educational system that provides the skills necessary for functioning in the modern economic environment. That's why greater and greater emphasis is being placed upon what they call the STEM subjects, the science, technology, mathematics, engineering subjects. We probably have an oversupply of lawyers and definitely an undersupply of engineers. No disrespect to lawyers. I am very close to. Yeah, well, you know, I'm married to a lawyer, so I won't say nothing bad about lawyers. But as an economy, what is driving the technological drive of the modern world economy lies in the engineering, science-based disciplines. And we're not adequately providing there in our school system, in our universities, and elsewhere. That's a basic transformation that has to take place. And also, we just have to get better results. It makes no sense to spend a few $100 billion each year providing for an educational system, and after 6-7 years in the system, you have to provide a few $1 billion more to carry out some remedial work. Doesn't make any sense at all. But that's a process that has to be at the heart of it. We are also undertaking to provide much more training opportunities. Much of it should be provided in the school, but some will inevitably involve post-school experiences. This year, for example, HEART expects to enroll some 60,000, mainly young people, which is 3.5% of the population, essentially, in training undertakings, various programs. We also, perhaps most of all in our society, need to provide access to capital for those people, and I expect a lot of young people, who want to do their own businesses, who want to get their start, to step up in life. That, to me, is perhaps the most exciting aspect of building the future which we seek. And I tell you why. Our society with our history has been one in which there are too many without the basic resources to put their ideas into practice. They're not born with any, into families with any accumulated wealth. And this sense of social and economic inequality that has been with us for hundreds of years and is at the heart of the feeling of injustice that so many people have, is really something that we have to break if we are ever to create a genuine society of equality, of opportunity in Jamaica. We want to get to the situation where if you have a grand idea, you don't have to be born with money to put your grand idea into practice. You want to enable the situation where a basic, as happens in the US, where a guy like Steve Jobs, an adopted youth in a basic average American family, could step out and form Apple Corporation and become the great business mogul of his generation. Or similarly, Bill Gates, who dropped out of university and did his thing. But you can't do that if interest rates are through the stratosphere. You can't even get to buy a car if interest rates are through the stratosphere. You can't get to imagine the basic possibility of owning your own house if interest rates are through the roof. So our challenge with this whole economic reform program, and it is involved great sacrifices to reduce these interest rates. It is purely coincidence that the Bank of Jamaica today announced a further 50 basis points of reduction in its rates. It's not because you are here, but it's because the program is working in the way that it should. Well, yeah, the interest rates at which they will lend the banks, which were 8.75 2 months ago, are today at 8. Mortgage rates, which were in double digits a few years ago, 3 years ago, in the 16%, and are now at 8 and falling, mean that when you go for your house loan, or if you have to get a loan to buy the house, but it will mean that your interest savings will be about $70,000, $80,000 less today than it would have been, assuming that you were going for $1.5 million or thereabouts. No, I'm assuming you are saving the balance. But if you're borrowing more, the savings are greater. The basic thing is the down payment, you know. The basic thing is the down payment. I can remember for myself the day when I decided I was tired of living in rent at a house, because a landlord woke me up one morning and I thought it was to tell me I needed to move in 2 weeks. And I said, you know what, come hell or high water, I'm not going to make this happen to me again. But it depends on what the economic environment in which you're operating is. Otherwise, life can look like just a blank wall if these rates are too high. And dreams look like idleness rather than what they should be, the energy behind your effort to create a new world. So, what else are we doing in that regard in addition to that? There are programs specifically within the Development Bank of Jamaica that aim at facilitating the up-and-coming, budding entrepreneur. There is the Ignite program, which is an innovation grant for new ideas to entrepreneurship, which offers grants of up to 3.5 million, I believe, for imaginative business enterprises to partner with whatever lending they have. There's a startup program which offers training as well as capital for business startups in the technology section and the animation industries. These are all industries which are making strides in Jamaica now. There are the DBJ's loans for MSME, medium, small enterprises through the banks, where there is in effect a lower rate of interest, and where what is more significant, they provide a voucher for technical assistance. What we have found is that in many instances, the inhibitor to getting access to even commercial bank loans is not the interest charges, but the fact that many people lack the know-how to operate a modern business. They don't have up-to-date audited accounts. The bank won't lend you no matter how grand your idea is and no matter how slick your tongue is, as far as presenting your case is concerned. No, that's all right. That's why I clarified. I'm talking about verbal communication now. You have to have a business plan that is credible and written down, not just something in your head. You have to have audited accounts because the bank can't take the risk. The banks themselves have to become more innovative and more imaginative, because over many, many, many years, when the government was their main borrower, simply calling them to run up the debt to meet basic operating costs, they forgot, many of them, how to do banking. And they found themselves just waiting for the call from the Ministry of Finance as to how much was needed to meet the basic expenses of government. Now, they look at the prospect of getting the payout of $62 billion, and we, meaning the government of Jamaica, is not going to borrow it back from them. They need to find people to lend it to, but without taking unnecessary. No. So what I would say, those of you who have plans or ideas, refine those ideas and get ready, because interest rates are going to move down even further in the next few months, because that's the kind of economic environment that we're seeking to create. In the course of, before the end of this calendar year, the regulatory and legislative framework for the operations of venture capital funds will be complete, which will mean that, again, those ideas will have access to yet another source of possible funding to move your brilliant, innovative idea forward. But beyond that, not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. I just want to mention a couple of areas that are moving apace in Jamaica and which I believe are helping to define the contours of the new Jamaican economy, which is emerging, has not yet emerged, but we can see the contours of this new economy emerging. Energy. Currently, there are two fascinating developments in solar energy. In southern Clarendon, there is the largest solar generating farm is being constructed as we speak. We have expanded wind generation capacity in St. Elizabeth and southern Manchester, around Wigton and up at Monroe, up at Malvern. Yeah. So that's an exciting sector. Some research is going on in sections of the government on creating biodiesel. Things like castor oil, cassava, all of these can be used to make biofuels. Gas LNG, first contract has been signed. BPO operations in the course of the next few months. The first medical tourism facility will be opened in St. James, and there are other plans underway. BPO operations have added about 8,000 jobs in the past 3 years, 2 years, and we believe there is no limit to the possibilities. If we get it right, we can easily move to the point of having to make much more strenuous efforts to provide adequately trained personnel. Port development, logistics operations in the private sector are all critical areas, and modern agriculture, high productivity agriculture. And tourism, there is, I can say without any doubt, perhaps the greatest phase of tourism construction underway now, greater than anything that has happened at any previous point in our history. But we need to build the linkages between the tourist economy and the other areas of our economy. And again, the entertainment and the sporting areas represent great prospects that we can seize and we must seize at this time. Remember a few years ago, remember the movie Cool Runnings? Or maybe you're too young to remember Cool Runnings. About the bobsled team. You saw the rerun? Okay, good. Google it. But the production team came to Jamaica when they were producing that movie, seeking financing. Our investor community didn't think this was a good bet, mired in the past. They got financing elsewhere, and it became the highest grossing movie of that year in Hollywood. Shows you the possibilities that we missed then, but we should not miss for the future. If the banks and yourselves and all the people who have an innovative idea and policymakers in government get it right, there is no limit to what we can do. When I was listening to the anthem a while ago, I thought actually of Bolt and Shelley and the others in Beijing. What they are doing on the field of sport, we all can do and achieve the same level of excellence in building the new economy. Thank you very much.